Hey there, Sharon Horne-Ellstrom here. Welcome to day 1744 of What You Up To Now, documenting the journey, primarily the online journey, but both online and offline, over the last, going on about 5 years now, since I came online from the offline and corporate world. And I was involved in lots of different businesses, worked for some of the best companies in the world, both privately held and publicly traded, household names that I won't share unless we're in a more intimate setting and talking about them. Sometimes for confidentiality agreements, sometimes because that's just the way you treat information that you learn from other organizations, with the respect that it was shared with you. So today we're talking about WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. I'm doing No Nonsense November again this year for the annual challenge. I've done it as an every other month challenge for the last couple of years during the pandemic, and then the year after the pandemic, because it was still a pretty crazy year, as a lot of things still seem very chaotic and crazy to many people, me included sometimes, with respect to what's going on in the world right now. And I guess the world's always been that way. It's just with social media and the media, we hear more about the craziness than we do what's actually going well, right? Media tends to focus on the negative when it's imperative that we focus on what works for us and what makes us feel good, not what makes us feel bad, which is the reason why I turned the news off in the 1980s. Part of a training I took for one of those great corporations I work for. I was challenged to turn the news off for the week of the training, so we weren't letting outside things, other people think for us, and other things influence us. It was a great exercise, and a lot of people went right back to watching the news, but some of us just gave it up once and for all. I can count on one hand, maybe two, the number of times since the 80s that I have purposefully turned on the news. I purposely turned on the news during 9/11. I purposely turned on the news during the Donald Trump election, the MAGA election. And I purposely turned on the news for a couple other things. But for the most part, I do not consume the news. I do not consume the social media version of the news, right? Why? Because it brainwashes me, just like everybody else, into thinking things are one way when they're absolutely positively not, right? Everybody that's sharing information with us in any way, shape, or form, me included, by the way, is sharing to influence other people, right? I get on here and I talk and I share my experiences, hoping that I can influence even one person to not make some of the mistakes I've made and to learn some of the lessons I've learned. That's what No Nonsense November is all about, is, okay, these are the biggest lessons I've learned so far in my life. And it's the third year I've done it, so I'm sure I've covered some different things, but I guarantee there are some lessons learned that I will have shared all 3 years. Why? Because they're that big a deal and they had that big an impact on my life. Now, they might be something that you're like, okay, I knew that when I was 3, which will embarrass me only a little, but not really, because it takes each of us different amounts of exposures and experiences and the willingness to see something, just like what you see is what you get, in order for it to impact our life. We're all on this amazing journey. And the cool thing is, each of our journeys is different and unique and special just for us. So what you see is what you get. This is actually an idiom as well as our topic for No Nonsense November. Flip Wilson, the comedian, made it popular in the 1960s when he portrayed a drag character as part of his U.S. television show. He played a Geraldine, and her tagline was, or her famous line every skit was, what you see is what you get. And then when computers came into being, because it was after the 1960s, as we're all full well aware, what you see is what you get became an acronym that was used by programmers and computer people to understand that what you put into the computer is what you're going to get out, right? What you see on the screen is what you're going to get unless you change something, right? Because the computer can only do what we tell it to. And I guess it reminds us to be clear and concise and keep things simple and be who we authentically really are. You know, gray hair, wrinkles, and all. We show up every day, right? Or we show up in our lives every day. We might not show up live like I do every day, but we show up in our lives every day. I can think of a lot of days and a lot of times in my life up until this point where I didn't show up, right? I was just going through the motions of living through the day. And we could feel bad about that. We could say, oh my gosh, think of all the time I've wasted not doing the things I knew I was capable of. Or we can say, yep, I needed that time to figure out what I want to do, what I want to create, who I want to be, and how I want to show up in the world. But I've found it's a lot more fun and a lot easier just to be yourself and learn and grow and realize that we're all imperfect humans, but we're doing the best we can at any given moment, given our past, our experiences, our beliefs, our core values, everything that's happened to us up until now. But right now we can decide and choose how we're going to show up in the world. Are we showing up as ourselves, authentically ourselves? Are we being the own voice in our heads and in our life? Or are we letting other people, other things, other circumstances take up space and rent space in our head and in our lives? I did that for a long time. I shared in, I think it was the BU challenge today, that I remember the day I woke up and I realized that the voice in my head was that of my ex-husband. He wasn't even my husband anymore, but that was the first voice I heard in my head saying something to me. It wasn't my own voice. How scary and ridiculous is that? Yet, how many of us, if we ask ourselves that question tomorrow morning when you wake up, pay attention to what the first thought in your head is? And is it actually coming from you and your own voice? I don't think I'm alone in that. I think there are millions, if not billions, of people that wake up and the first voice they hear is not their own. Maybe it's God's voice or a higher power. And that's awesome. That's amazing. But if it's not a higher power or your own voice, then it's something we should question. I'm so grateful and so glad I did, because it lifted a whole load and filter that wasn't even me out of my life and out of my subconscious and out of my conscious mind, and made it easier for me to show up and be myself every day. So WYSIWYG we're talking about today. Love to know your experience with this. What you see is what you get. I believe people show us exactly who they are in the current state right now when we interact with them, if we're willing to look at it and see them. But we only see what we want to see, right? Because what we see, what we allow ourselves to see, is what's going to show up in our lives. All right. Have an awesome day. If I can help you, ask. Otherwise, I'll be with you tomorrow. Get those blinders off. Bye.